Good morning, everyone. So today we are unable to take our class in the usual time. So I'm going to upload a recording for you. So let's start off from where we left in our last class. So last class we were looking at the Colombo Stock Exchange in detail. So there we saw what our stock exchange is up to, how is it structured. So we have Colombo Stock Exchange as the nucleus of our entire equity capital market here in Sri Lanka. The Colombo Stock Exchange is regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka. So today throughout the class we are going to look into this commission in detail. Okay. So this is the structure. So on top of Colombo Stock Exchange, we have Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka. And under Colombo Stock Exchange, there was CDS Private Limited and CSC Clear Private Limited. And I told you in prior two classes as well, CSC Clear Limited is now no more. They only have the central depository system under Colombo Stock Exchange at the moment. So the products traded in the Colombo Stock Exchange, we looked at what those are. We saw that there are some new products that they have launched and they are going to launch as well. What was the very recent new product that they had launched? That is the Real Estate Investment Trust. So we saw that in detail as well. It was out in 2020, all the policy documents. So far, there's no any listing per se in the exchange, as it might be due to this being a very new concept. But once time goes on, we will have some new listings in our stock exchange under this REIT category. But there are certain essential items that you need to remember when it comes to REIT. What a real estate investment trust is, what is the purpose of having a real estate investment trust. I told that you in detail, how the usual purchase and sale of real estate works, and due to the drawbacks in those, how the real estate investment trust was developed. And I told you this was something that came from US in 1960. It's only introduced in Sri Lanka in 2020 after a very long gap. Even though we call it a new product to our local market internationally, this is one of the already, this product is already available in the international arena. Okay. In our local context, REITs are only allowed as listed REITs in our Colombo Stock Exchange. REITs are not allowed to be operated as a private entity. Please remember that. And the format in which they have to be issued or they have to operate is as a category of unit trust. So in the same format of a unit trust is how they should operate. Okay. So what are the benefits of investing in REIT? And I think I've already uploaded you the material of the regulations involved, the parties involved in REIT as well. So have a look at that. Then we saw the boards available for listing in our Colombo Stock Exchange. Earlier we had main board and Dirisavi board. And I told you what type of a company would ideally fall into this category. And then subsequently, we had two additional boards being introduced. It was the multi-currency board and the Empower board. So we have main board having the large corporates, big entities. And then we have Dirisavi board, which fairly comprises of emerging companies, which are in like a medium tier, you could say. The Empower board caters into the SME segment, the small and medium scale entities, the ones which are just entering the capital market, you could say. Multi-currency board is for the foreign companies looking for a second listing in our stock exchange. When it comes to multi-currency board, remember two things. One is a foreign company is allowed to come in here, but the listing in Sri Lanka has to be a secondary listing, which means that company should have been listed in their own country and then should approach Sri Lanka for the secondary listing. That's the first thing. Then the second one is who is allowed to invest and trade in the shares of this companies which are listed on the multi-currency board, the non-resident investors in Sri Lanka through a local custodian bank. Those are the two key factors that you need to keep in mind regarding to the features of this board. And I told you how to differentiate and the reasons behind the eligibility criteria that they have introduced. When you go to the note, I've already given you a summary as well. So using the summary, we saw that stated capital and even the positive net assets are two criteria that are never compromised. Each board has an eligibility criteria with regard to this, with regard to stated capital and the positive net asset. Why? Equity is a significant component of when it comes to a company. And especially if a company is coming to listing under Colombo Stock Exchange, the investors are worried about how strong that entity is, how well that entity can bear up external shocks and risks. So what is the ultimate component bearing such risk? That would be equity. So they would want a stronger equity base to ensure that the company could withstand such shocks. Correct? So there is always a criteria when it comes to stated capital and the positive net assets. But again, remember, under the multi-currency board, they did not use the word stated capital. You could see here all the other boards, they use the word stated capital specifically. But here in the multi-currency board, the word they use is just capital. Because it's relating to a foreign entity, they could word it anyways. They would word it anyways. So therefore, it's just termed as capital. So these two are the essential component when it comes to eligibility criteria. And next we saw the profit after tax eligibility criteria. So when it comes to profit after tax, why is profit after tax a focus area for an investor? Because higher the profits, higher the equity going to be in the future, because profits would ideally be converted into retained earnings, improving the equity of the company. Okay, so profitability is one of the key areas for an investor. But we saw that not all companies had a profitability criteria to meet. Only the well-established entities had to comply with that. So we saw this profit after tax requirement in the main board and in the multi-currency board. We didn't see this in our Dirisavi board and the Empower board. Why? Dirisavi had the medium tier companies. Empower board has the SME companies. It's unfair to impose on them a profitability requirement, to say that, okay, for the last 2 years, for the last 1 year, you must have had a profit. It's difficult for such companies to comply by. So when the Dirisavi board and the Empower board didn't have that criteria, instead of profitability, they had an alternative criteria put in, a requirement with regards to operating history. For Dirisavi board, they required at least 1 year of operating history, so that they know, investors are confident that this company knows what's happening in the industry. Because operating history will tell you, okay, this company has actually engaged in the business, so they know what is happening in the market. When it comes to Empower board, giving a 1 year criteria was again too risky. So to mitigate that, they made it 2 years. At least 2 years, the company should be operating in the market, should have operating history of at least 2 years, so that the company knows, okay, this is my customer, this is their need, these are my competitors, so these are my strengths. To get that awareness, better to have an operating history requirement for these entities. Okay, these were the main ones. In addition to that, we saw several other criteria as well. Notable other criteria was the minimum public holding criteria. We saw that for main board and the Dirisavi board. A key point to highlight is, if the company is unable to meet with the minimum public holding requirements, they will be transferred to the second board. Now remember, this is not an immediate transfer. Usually the Colombo Stock Exchange considers the company's request, looks into the environment, and then give them a reasonable time to comply with. If they don't comply within that reasonable time period, then they are moved to this board called a second board. So if you know that there's a company in the second board, it means that the company is not complying to their minimum public holding requirements. Okay. Another key factor that you need to remember in the Empower board is there is a requirement for a sponsor. We saw that in the website as well. There are a list of sponsors that the Colombo Stock Exchange has given so that the SME entities who have no prior experience when it comes to capital raising or the capital market can approach these sponsors, get the knowledge that they require when they apply to list their securities in the Colombo Stock Exchange. To get that guidance, they want the SME to couple with a sponsor and apply for the listing. Okay. And another important feature is in the multi-currency board and in the Empower board, we saw a requirement relating to the audit opinion. They wanted the company should not have a modified audit opinion or emphasis of matter relating the going concern of the company. That was the requirement. What was the reason behind imposing such a requirement? Because the investors want some kind of a assurance that the accounting governance of these entities are done in a proper manner so that the entity is not heading towards a disaster. Now, when it comes to a main board, such a requirement was not required. It was already well-established entities. Okay. When it comes to Dirisavi board again, these are the emerging companies. Already well known, already like it's a growing entity in the market. The brand is known in the market. There's some kind of a goodwill that is in the market. But when it comes to the Empower board entities, which are the SMEs and the multi-currency board entities, it is difficult for the investor to know about this company. They might not know how this company is operating because the operating environment of a foreign company is abroad. SME is very small that the investor wouldn't know. So in such a background, having this requirement gives some kind of assurance to the investor. Look here, there is no material concern about the going concern of this entity. Okay, to give that assurance is why you have this criteria. Then we moved in and saw with regarding to debt listing, what are the requirements they have. Now, why I'm going through these in summary for you is these are the very commonly questioned areas for you, and it's somewhat difficult for the student to remember. So have your own way of summarizing it. For me, always when there is a proper rationale for that requirement, it's easier for me to remember. Okay, so that's why I'm explaining you the rationale behind that requirement. Okay, so when it comes to debt listing, there are two different requirements for debt listing depending on the type of the entity who is issuing that instrument. If the entity who is issuing that instrument is a government entity, okay, then the government entity has two options. Okay, one is they could go and get a rating for their instrument from a credit rating agency who is registered at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay, so if you draw like a summary map, you write government entity on top, put two arrows. One option is get a credit rating for the debt security to be issued by a credit rating agency registered at the Securities and Exchange Commission. That is one option. Or the second option is to go and get a guarantee for their issuance. Now that guarantee should have some kind of a feature. What are those features? It should be unconditional and it should be irrevocable. I explained it to you what it means, what unconditional means and what irrevocable means. Okay. So this guarantee can come from three parties. One is obviously the government of Sri Lanka. Why obviously government of Sri Lanka? We are talking about a government entity or a public corporation. So the guarantee can come from the sovereign entity itself. So the government of Sri Lanka itself could offer that guarantee. Okay. If not, they could approach a bank. Now remember, when you go to a bank, there are three sub-criteria that the bank should comply with. It should be a bank licensed by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. That's the first requirement. Second is the bank should have at least a A rating. Okay. And third is that rating should be given by a rating agency registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. When all these three are met, then such a bank can be approached. Okay. Now the requirement for the bank of licensed by central bank, minimum of A rating, and the rating should come from a rating agency registered at the Securities and Exchange Commission is not an option. All three should be complied by. Okay. Then finally, they could approach any agency. That agency can be an international, multilateral and a bilateral agency who would ideally guarantee for the capital and the interest. Okay. So they have two options: get a rating for their issuance, the credit debt instrument itself, or get a guarantee from these three entities. Simple for the government entity or a public corporation. But when they move to a company, now this is a private entity. Okay. So the private entity's requirements or the eligibility requirements are a bit more stringent, a bit more tight. For a private company, it is mandatory that they get a rating for their debt security. It's not an option. Now, for the government entity, it was an option. They could get a credit rating or go for a guarantee. But for a company, it is a must to get a credit rating for their debt securities. And that credit rating has to be one notch above the investment grade. Now, for a government entity, they are willing to accept the debt security to be rated and that rating to be at least at investment grade, which means anything above or equal to BBB. Okay. But for a private company, their requirement, I told you, is a bit more strict. So they are saying, no, we can't accept investment grade only. It has to be at least one notch above the investment grade, which means at least a BBB plus. A BBB cannot be accepted. Okay. So for a company, rating is a must and that rating has to be one notch above the investment grade, which means a minimum of a BBB plus. Okay. That is the main requirement. If the company requires in their own discretion, they could submit a guarantee as well. Now, the guarantee requirements are very similar to what the government entity had. It should be an unconditional and an irrevocable guarantee. And the issuing parties are also the same, but the government of Sri Lanka is not there. Why would government of Sri Lanka would give their guarantee for a private company? Doesn't make a rationale, right? So the government of Sri Lanka is opted out. So from two parties, they could get that guarantee, either from a bank or from any agency which is international, multilateral or bilateral. Okay. Another important point that you should know when it comes to a private company is, now for the private company, the credit rating requirement for their debt issue is mandatory, right? So, and remember, it has to be one notch above the investment grade. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to get this one notch above the investment grade. Okay. Then certain companies, what were they doing? They were approaching several credit rating agencies and getting several ratings. Okay. Like imagine you, there are 3 credit rating agency. I approach A and A gives me triple B. I approach the entity B. Entity B gives me C as the credit rating. When I approach the credit rating company C is giving me a credit rating of AA. As a company, what would I choose? I would obviously go choose the credit rating company which offered me AA, because that's the best rating, correct? So there were attempts to do that. It's called opinion shopping. Okay, in opinion shopping, they approach several rating companies and try to get the better rating shopped out. So to mitigate that, the Securities and Exchange Commission put forward and had a requirement mentioning that if a company approaches more than one credit rating agency to get a credit rating, then okay, you're allowed to do that, fine, but the rating that you choose has to be the lowest of all the ratings provided. So if I approach the 3 rating companies and one offered me triple B, one gave me C, one gave me AA, I would choose AA, right? But the Securities and Exchange Commission has mandated that you choose the lowest, which means C. Because if someone is giving you C as the credit rating, which means that something really bad in that company, right? So to make sure the investor interest is not harmed, Exchange Commission has made it a requirement that you choose the lowest credit rating. So which would be C. So if you take C, the company can't list their debenture or the debt security in the market. Okay. Then we saw what a default board is. We saw that when there are any non-compliance, now not only on listing, not only at the time of listing, even after listing, there are continuous listing rules that a company should abide by. And if the entities don't abide by those listing rules, then they are transferred to a default board because they have violated certain regulations. Okay. If the companies are in the default board more than 1 month, then the the Colombo Stock Exchange can make a press release notifying the investors, look here, it is because of this reason that the company is in the default board. Okay, they could publicize that reason. They have the right for it. But before they do that, they have to do it in consultation with the SEC. They need to notify their regulator as well. If the company has been violating the rule and being in the default board for more than 3 months without any rectification, then the CSE, Colombo Stock Exchange, can refer the matter to SEC for further actions. Okay. And then we saw the price indices available in the Colombo Stock Exchange are all share price index and the S&P Sri Lanka. Remember, S&P Sri Lanka 20 has 20 companies which are of high liquidity, mostly traded entities and have a high capitalization. And these are rebalanced every 6 months. which is in June and December. We saw the articles for that as well. Okay. Then we saw what total return indices was. In total return indices, not only the price movement, we also capture in the dividend income as well. So that the index would tell you this is the average return that this market would give. Okay. Then we saw what global industry classification standard was. It's a way to classify entities. We saw how detailed this classification goes. It goes from 11 sectors to 24 industry groups, 69 industries and 158 sub-industries. I would request you to remember these numbers, possible for a MCQ, you never know. And remember the abbreviation abbreviation and the elongated version of this. Again, another possibility, they will say GIS is a new classification introduced in CSC. What is the elongated version of this? Global Industry Classification Standard. These are the features of GIS. It's a universal classification measure. It is considered accurate because it starts from a macro level and goes down to a very micro level. So you could classify it on a very micro scale, or you could even classify it on a macro scale as well. Okay. You could analyze a sector separately. You can analyze a sub-industry separately as well. Okay. And it is flexible. It allows you to go from a more general sector to a very specified sub-industry as well. And it is considered evolving because annually this classification is reviewed to check whether it is up to date, whether there is any new additions that need to be made. So here you could see that this project was adopted in 2016 as a pilot run, and it was a secondary classification. So we had our own classification and the GIS in parallel for 4 years, and in January 2020 we completely abandoned our classification and moved to the GIS classification standards. And these are the advantages of moving into the GIS. Again, please note it down. So before we can finish off the last week lesson, the last topic that we are yet to see is circuit breakers. Now this is something already that we had in our market. Circuit breakers is something that was already available in our Colombo Stock Exchange. What is this circuit breaker means is that it's a way to temporarily stop the market. Why do you have to temporarily stop a market? If there is a situation where the market is crashing. What do you mean by crashing? It is falling drastically. It could be due to a panic situation. Mostly it's due to that. Due to a news breaking out and due to a panic situation, all the investors might want to get out of that market. So on a panicked scenario, they would quickly start selling. When they start selling, the entire market would start to decline, and that declining percentage could increase on a drastic scale. Like within minutes, it could go down to by at least 20%. Okay. So to stop that scenario or to temporarily halt that, they introduce these circuit breakers. Okay. Why? Because when there is a continuous decline and you stop the market for some time, it allows some time for the investors to cool down, to see what's happening in the market, to see the opinions of the other investors, and maybe change their decision or to maybe stop that panic selling. Okay. Now, usually in a circuit breaker, they halt the market for 30 minutes. Okay. So in that 30 minutes, the investors might analyze the trades that have happened so far and could have seen, oh my God, even though that we are selling in a very panicked way, there are buyers who are buying it from us, which means that the buyers have some kind of a hope for this market. So let's not sell it immediately. Let's hold for some time. So a circuit breaker allows the investor to have a cooling off time. Okay, to stop that panic selling from happening, to avoid that selling pressure. Okay, so that's why they have circuit breakers introduced in the market. Now, I told you, we already had the circuit breakers. Earlier, our circuit breaker was operating in a way that whenever there is a drop of 5% in our Standard and Poor's SL20 index, when there is a 5% decline in the S&P SL20 index, the market closes by 30 minutes. Okay, that's the criteria. Whenever it falls by 5%, you will close for 30 minutes. Why did they choose S&P SL20 index? We saw S&P SL20 index comprises of the largest and the most liquid stocks. Okay, it comprises of the stronger companies of the equity market. Am I correct? Yes. Why? It has the largest and the highly traded stocks. These are the entities. If it's a largest multi-capitalized, with largest entity with a high market capitalization, it refers that it's a larger corporate. Correct? So if this index starts to collapse, it essentially means panic selling. Would you sell a very good entity's shares unless there is some material news impacting that? Let's say there is a collapse of that entity, then such a fall is warranted. But when there is a panic situation, when the investors sell, they don't see the entity as a good entity or a bad entity. Their motive is to get out of the market because the market is risky. Okay, even the country is unstable and all, they would sell off and get out. Okay, so when this index fall, it's an indication of such a panic sale. Okay, that's why this index was used. Now this criteria, now earlier what we had, whenever there's a 5% drop in the S&P SL20, there's a 30-minute hold. Now this policy is rectified to a 3-tiered circuit breaker, which means now the circuit breaker happens in 3 layers, in 3 stages. But again, even at the amendment, the circuit breaker is still attached to the S&P SL20 index. Even though the all share price index collapses, if the S&P SL20 is stable, circuit breaker will not work. Okay, remember that. Why? Circuit breaker is linked to S&P SL20. Now let's see how this 3-tiered circuit breaker works. So the first circuit breaker occurs when the S&P SL20, that index, falls by 5%. If it falls by 5%, then the first circuit breaker works and the market will halt for 30 minutes. Okay, the initial collapse of 5%, then the first circuit breaker works. And when the circuit breaker works, what happens? The market is halted for 30 minutes. No activities. Market is frozen. No buying, no selling. Okay. And then after the 30 minutes, the market is again resumed. It's starting. Now let's say after starting, again the S&P SL20 drops. And now it drops by another 2.5%, which means altogether it has now fallen by 7.5%. Then the second circuit breaker works. What happens when the second circuit breaker works? Again, market is frozen, it's halted for another 30 minutes. First circuit breaker works when there's a 5% fall. Second circuit breaker works when there is a 2.5% fall in addition to that 5% drop. Okay, so altogether it's a 7.5 drop. Okay, let's say after 30 minutes, again market resumes. When the market opens again after the second 30 minutes halt, let's say again the S&P SL20 is collapsing, another 2.5%, which means already it has fallen by 7.5 and another 2.5 is falling, which means totally for that day only 10% decline in the market. Okay, and there is a 10% decline in the market or more, third circuit breaker will work. Now what happens in the third circuit breaker? Again, will the market get halted? Yes, trading will be halted, but now it's not closed for 30 minutes. It's closed for the entire day. Why? If they further allow, it's going to keep, sometimes it might go on collapsing. So to prevent that, the market is entirely closed throughout that day. So it works in 3 stages. Remember that. Okay. This is the circular that they issued in 1st May. Why did they bring this in? It was during the peak of the COVID situation, the first wave in Sri Lanka. We already had the measure, but to curtail the frequent fall, they brought this in. I don't know whether the articles are available, but if you had read the news frequently, you would have seen how whenever there is a market collapse, there's a huge amount of money lost in the market. Now see, in this RC, stock market suffers worst crash in history with 245 billion in value loss. So when there is a value lost as such an amount, the circuit breakers would have definitely worked. See, was altered twice. By in 2 separate occasions, there was a 5% fall. So the circuit breaker works in such a situation to halt, to stop the decline from getting worse. Okay. Why? Because this is due to a panic situation that is happening in the market. Now, when there is a COVID situation and a lockdown coming in, people see it negatively. People anticipate much worse consequences than what might actually happen. In forecasting such worse consequences, they will panic and start selling everything and try to realize their money. That will essentially lose a lot of invested amount in terms of capital loss for other investors and the general market. Okay, so that's what a circuit breaker is. So here you can see how the circuit breaker had worked. Whenever there's a decline, the market gets halted. See, you can see the halt periods here. And usually after the halt, you expect some kind of a recovery to come in because it's a cooling off time. Okay, that cooling off time lets the investors reflect on their thinking, see how the buyers are reacting, and then revise their decisions. Okay, that's why a circuit breaker is introduced in the first place. So with that, we are done with the equity market lessons. And today we'll be looking at the regulator. Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka. So this is what we looked at in detail, the summary. So what is Securities and Exchange Commission? What is their role? They are a statutory body, which means they are set up by the government. It's a government entity. What is their role? Their role is to regulate and oversee the capital market. This is their role that they play in the market. Okay, so if Securities and Exchange Commission is a statutory body, then obviously there is an act behind that. So it was established under the Securities and Exchange Act number 36 of 1987. This is the primary act, and it was subsequently amended thrice through 3 amendments. You don't have to remember the amendment numbers, but just know that this is the primary act number. Okay, what is the mission of the Securities and Exchange Commission? They are established with the purpose to promote the market, to develop the market, and to maintain the market in a fair, efficient, orderly, and transparent manner. Now remember, promote and develop are 2 different words. Promote meaning, now you would have seen SEC approaching international investors and doing road shows. This is why you need to read a lot of news. They usually approach several investors and do road shows, promotions for the investment opportunities here. They do investor forums abroad. I remember it was highly done during 2017, 2019. Here you could see. What do? They promote the exchange, they promote the capital market abroad so that the international or foreign investors are aware about this emerging capital market in Sri Lanka and they are keen to invest as well. So that is promotion. What do you mean by develop? Develop meaning develop the internal works of the capital market. Have good regulations, have the up-to-date products in the market, okay, have the up-to-date technology, okay, maintain a capital market which is fair, efficient, orderly, and a transparent market. They should ensure that the market sustains at that same position without a decline in their quality. Okay, so this is the mission of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Why do we need such a commission, or can we operate our Colombo Stock Exchange without this commission? No. Why? The commission plays a very important role in the capital market. We are going to see those. The very first importance when it comes to Securities and Exchange Commission is the main role is to look after the investors. Now I told you the success of a capital market depends on the investors. The investor confidence that the investors have on the capital market is very, very essential. Okay. Now imagine a scenario where I have invested in the capital market and I have got cheated. My experience is bad. I have lost the confidence on the capital market. I will say my experience to another person and avoid or prevent him from investing as well. Okay, so such a scenario will lead to very less investors in the capital market, and that will decline or may have a major impact on the success of the capital market. Why? Very few people are there to buy securities, and the people who are available to sell don't have anyone to any buyers to sell it for, so the prices decline. So, if the SEC can protect the investors so that their losses, they are free from losses or their losses are mitigated, the investor confidence is not hurt. Okay. So, when investor confidence is maintained, my experience is great, and the others will also have a confidence to enter the market, which will indirectly help in the promotion and the development of the market. Okay, so protecting investors is a very important role of SEC. Okay. Next is to maintain an efficient and orderly and a transparent market. SEC is a regulator of the capital market. So as a regulator, they should ensure that the actions of the market are done in an orderly manner. It should follow the procedures in place. One person's transaction, the way it is executed shouldn't be different from another. Okay. And it should be transparent. Everyone should be available to know. There should be available information for the public to know what's happening in the market. Other is efficiency. How well the market is operating. So to maintain that and to ensure that, the Securities and Exchange Commission is important. Third, we have enhanced investor confidence. That will happen when they protect the investors as well, and when the SEC lays down several regulations, they do those regulations with a view to enhance investor confidence. Now, you would have seen when we discussed the real estate investment trust, why did they come up with this requirement? Only a listed REIT is allowed. Because a real estate investment trust is a very new product to Sri Lanka. Correct? Now, you and I are aware about this because we are educated. We read newspapers, we work in a bank, we are aware about what's happening. Okay? So, we know at least some kind of information when it comes to this product. But there are certain parties who know nothing about this product. But they know real estate investment trust is a good business opportunity, good way to earn quick money. So without any knowledge, they would approach anyone who holds a board saying, look here, I am doing real estate investment trust. They would trust them and put money. And when the money is lost, the investor is affected. Okay. So that's why Securities and Exchange Commission has brought in this requirement saying, look here, REITs are only allowed as listed REIT. So if it's not a listed REIT, then they are not allowed to operate at all. Why are they keeping only listed REITs? Because as a listed REIT, the Securities and Exchange Commission can monitor them. Why? To be a REIT, to get listed, they have to apply for license to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Correct? So when they apply for license, the SEC will monitor and go through the operations of that entity. It's some kind of a control that a good entity will get listed. Okay. So these are the measures or the ways that SEC has put forward regulations to protect investor confidence. Then you have developed the capital market. We saw that as well. Bringing in the new products, bringing in new technological developments in the market. Okay. They need to ensure that our local capital market is in part to the international capital markets as well. At least a close alternative to the international markets. We should have the same products that are introduced in the global capital markets. Now, that's one of the reasons we have REIT, right? REIT is an international product commonly seen everywhere, but we didn't have it. So, move towards including that into the Colombo Stock Exchange is a development in a capital market with a new product. Okay. Then finally, to prevent market irregulations. As a regulator, they are there to look into the regulatory, whether the regulations are properly met, whether there is any fraudulent activities in the market, and to prevent them so that, again, investor confidence is not affected and to protect the investors. Okay. Now we are going to look at who are the members in this commission. Now altogether you have 10 members in the Securities and Exchange Commission. And these 10 members are non-executive members of the commission. Okay. And these non-executive members of the commission are discharged with the duty to adhere or to introduce policies for regulatory requirements. They are the policy making arm of the Securities and Exchange Commission. They are like the ultimate authority on how the SEC Commission should be acting. Okay. Now these 10 members are selected in a very different manner to the other commissions. You have 3 members who are elected on an ex officio basis. What do you mean by ex officio basis? If a person bears a certain designation, then that person is automatically a member of this committee. Now, for example, Deputy Secretary to the Treasury. If a person gets elected to be the Deputy Secretary to the Treasury, that becomes his designation, then automatically he becomes a member to the Securities and Exchange Commission as well. Okay. Next, Registrar of Companies. Let's say the Registrar of Company resigns and a new Registrar of Company comes. Now he's appointed as a Registrar of Company. The moment he gets that designation, he also becomes a member to the SEC. Why do you call it ex officio? By just getting that particular designation, they become a member to the commission as well. So you have Deputy Secretary to the Treasury, Registrar of Companies, and the President of Institute of Chartered Accountants. You have the Chartered Institute's President. Once they get appointed as a President, they also become a member in the SEC. Now remember these 3 entities, just like what you learn in a central bank, who are the members of the monetary board. You saw that you have 2 ex officio members. Here you have 3 ex officio members. Remember who they are. Possible to be a MCQ. Okay. Now these are 3 people appointed on ex officio basis. You have 7 left. How are the balance 7 decided? The balance 7 is appointed by the Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance can appoint the balance 7. Okay. Now in that balance 7 as well, there is one person that you need to focus on. That is the Deputy Governor of CBSL. Central Bank of Sri Lanka usually have more than one deputy governors. Okay, if you go to the website, you should be able to see that. They have more than one deputy governor. Okay, when you have more than one deputy governor, what happens is the governor of central bank will nominate one of them to the Minister of Finance. Look here, one of them we will nominate on behalf of Central Bank to be appointed to SEC Commission. Okay, so first the governor of CBSL should nominate them. Okay, then out of the nomination, the Minister of Finance will select one and appoint. Okay, so out of the 7, one selection works as that. You can't tell that as an ex officio member. Why? Because just because you become a deputy governor, you don't become a member in the commission. You become a deputy governor and you have to get nominated by the governor, and then you have to get appointed by the Minister of Finance to be a member. Okay, then the balance 6 persons. The balance 6 persons are from the private sector. Now, when you hire from the private sector, when the Minister of Finance appoints them from the private sector, he looks for the expertise, the market expertise to come in. So they look for areas like law, finance, banking, industry experience, the private sector experience, and nominate 6 people as the members to the SEC. So this is how the 10 members are selected. Okay, and out of the 10, again, Minister of Finance can select one as the chairman of the commission. The usual tenure is 3 years, that each member can hold their office up to 3 years, and they are always eligible for reappointment as well. Okay. Now we are going to look at what are the objectives of SEC as per the SEC Act. Okay. Now this is one of the most tested questions when it comes to SEC. So if you can put an asterisk to it, please do. This is a must that you should remember. Okay. Now out of these 4, one is very simple for you. What is that? Why do you have SEC? To protect investor interest. That is already given. Okay, so protection of investor interest is one of the objectives of SEC, even in the Act. Okay, but the very important objective of SEC is to ensure that there is a market and to sustain that market in an orderly and a fair manner. Which means the SEC has the obligation to create a market for the securities so that the securities can be issued and traded. Remember the keywords: issuance refers to a primary market, trading refers to a secondary market. So here they ideally mean that the market that they introduce should comprise on both. So creation of a market where the securities can be issued and traded. Also, they need to maintain the market in an orderly and a fair manner. This is one of the main objectives of SEC. Okay. Then you have protecting the interest of the investors. Thirdly is another important objective. Operate a compensation fund to protect investors from financial loss arising as a result of licensed stockbroker or stock dealer being found incapable of meeting his contractual obligations. In the event a stockbroker or a stock dealer doesn't meet their contractual obligation, to protect the investors from financial loss, you have to operate a fund called a compensation fund. And this requirement is given to the SEC under their Act. Okay. Finally, regulation of the securities market and ensure that the professional standards are met within the market. They should have good regulations of the securities market and to ensure that the professional standards are met. These are the 4 objectives of SEC. The third one is important. Why? The SEC operates three funds. Okay. Out of the three funds, only one fund is mentioned in their objective. It shows to you how important that fund is. Okay. So if you can, that's why I've underlined it. Just highlight that and put an asterisk as well. Compensation fund is mentioned in the objectives of SEC, and that is established to protect the investors from any financial losses occurring due to a failure from the stockbroker or stock dealer from failing to discharge their contractual obligation. Okay. Now we move at powers, duties, and functions of the SEC. Now, SEC has several powers, duties, and functions. Okay. Out of this, the first slide will tell you the very critical powers, duties, and functions. Okay. First slide we are going to look at here is very, very important for you. So pay attention. Granting a license to a body corporate to operate a stock exchange is a power of the SEC, is a duty of the SEC, and is also a function of SEC. Okay. And the other is to grant a license to any person to act as a stock broker, stock dealer is also their function, duty, and power. To grant a license to a managing company to operate a unit trust is also under their purview. Now here, what I want you to stress is, underline this word, grant a license, grant a license, grant a license. Now you can see SEC is allowed to grant licenses for 4 entities: stock exchanges, stock broker, stock dealer, managing company operating a unit trust. Now that is very, very important. They could only grant licenses for these 4 entities. Now this was before real estate investment trust came in. Now they could even grant licenses for REITs as well. You get here? Through a license issued by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So even for REIT, license can be issued. Okay. Next, what you are going to see is a certificate of registration. Now, for certain market intermediaries, the SEC doesn't give a license. SEC will say, look here, I have registered you. You are a registered entity in the SEC. Now, that's why when you went to debt listing, you saw this word as rating agency registered with SEC, not licensed by SEC. Now you can see how important the word is, right? They are just registered with the SEC. Okay. So SEC has the power to grant this registration to market intermediaries as well. Now market intermediaries, who are these intermediaries? We'll see those in detail. Okay. Next, to give specific or general instructions to an exchange, to a broker, to a dealer, to a managing company operating a unit trust, or to a registered market intermediary. The SEC has the power to give general or specific directions to any of these parties. Okay. So in a capital market, are these the only parties? You have investors, you have these operational infrastructure, and then you have the market intermediary. So the exchange, the broker, the dealer, the managing company of the unit trust is licensed. The market intermediary is registered. investor, let's say you could ignore, you are looking, the SEC is looking to protect the investor. Now, who is the other party? The listed companies. The SEC can also exert their directions on the listed companies as well. So the SEC can give them either general directions or specific directions to certain companies. Then we have very general powers and duties that you could look at: to grant a compensation to any investors if they suffer a financial loss. They're referring here to the compensation fund. To advise the government on the development of the securities market, whether you need any infrastructure development, any new regulations, any new global classifications to be introduced, and so on. To employ officers and servants as necessary for the purpose of carrying out the work of the commission. Okay. Regulate the listing and issue of securities in the stock exchange. They could change the listing requirements and so on. To direct a licensed stock exchange to reject any application made for listing. Let's say a new company has applied for listing. The Securities and Exchange Commission could inform the exchange, look here, please reject these applications. They could direct the exchange to act as such. Okay. To cancel, suspend the listing of any security or a trading, or to suspend the trading of all securities for not more than 3 days for the protection of investors. If they feel that a trading of an security or a listing of a certain security is going to harm the protection of the investors, they could cancel it, they could suspend it, but not more than 3 days. Within the 3 days, they need to do any alternative measures. Okay. Then they could inquire and conduct investigations on any activities of the exchange, activities of a dealer, broker, managing company, or even a listed entity, a registered market intermediary. They can conduct investigations of any party related to the capital market. Furthermore, they can publish any findings of wrongdoing when it comes to a borrower, a dealer, a managing company, a market intermediary, or a listed company as well. They could implement policies and programs of the government with relating to the securities of the market. If there's any specific programs, they could implement those as well. They are authorized to acquire and hold or give it on lease or hire or mortgage on any movable and immovable property. They could request the registrar of companies to call upon a private limited liability company to become a public limited company if they feel that this private limited company is too big, it needs to be converted into a public limited company. They could request the registrar of company to do that, to issue that call as well. Okay. And because they are regulators, they could regulate any takeovers or mergers. Now, if there is a merger or a takeover between more than one listed companies, whereas at least one party who is invested in that takeover is a listed company, the SEC can get involved. Okay. Now, let's say there's a merger and a takeover where everyone is a listed entity there, or even at least one person is a listed entity, still the SEC can involve in that entire arrangement. Okay. Finally, they have the authority to do any investigation if they feel that there is a violation or contravention to the SEC Act. Okay. These are the powers, duties, and functions of the SEC. Now we are going to look at the licenses granted by SEC. We saw that in the powers, the first slide as well. SEC is powered to grant licenses only to exchanges, dealers, brokers, managing company of unit trust, and now we have REITs as well, include that as well. Okay. Now these dealers or brokers are very different entities. We will learn that when we go to the financial market service providers, and even in the latter stage of the class. Just for now, understand what is a stock exchange. We learned that stock exchange is a platform you have that enables you to trade. It's a platform that is provided for you to engage in your daily trading. Okay. Who is a dealer? Dealer is someone who's working on their own account. He's not working on someone else's behalf. He looks to protect, to enhance their own interest. But who is a broker? Broker is someone who is acting on behalf of somebody else. They look to protect someone else's interest. They work for someone else. Now, for example, best example that you could understand who a dealer and a broker is, if you have, let's say it's a apartment or real estate, you have brokers when it comes to real estate. A person who will get involved, make the buyer and the seller meet, and when the sale is done, he will get a commission and move out. The broker. You have certain dealers who come in, there is a seller. Okay. The dealer will buy in their own name. Let's say I am a dealer. I will buy that particular apartment or house from the seller in my own name. Okay. And what do I do? Let's say it's a house. I will demolish the entire house, rebuild the house completely with like palace, like a palace. Okay. And then I would approach a buyer and sell it off at a higher price. What am I getting? I'm getting a gain. And that gain is for me, not for somebody else. I am transacting on my own account, which is what a dealer does. Okay. Finally, managing companies of unit trust. We already know there are companies who operate unit trust. So for that particular company, the license is given by the SEC. Okay. Next, you have market intermediaries registered with SEC. Now, when it comes to market intermediaries, the SEC will register them and offer them a certificate of registration. Okay, there's a certificate of registration handed to them. Okay, who are such intermediaries who are registered at SEC? You can find 5. One is margin providers, underwriters, credit rating agency, investment managers, and clearing house. What is a margin provider? Who is a margin provider? We saw that in our capital market. When we saw the primary and the secondary market, we saw what a margin provider is, what is a margin trading is. What is margin trading? You get a certain amount in credit by pledging your shares and the shares that you are going to buy, and use that credit to invest in the market. That is margin trading. Now, the person who provides you that amount as on credit is a margin provider. Okay, now let's say I am a broker and one of you is my customer. You already have 1 million worth of shares. Okay. But there is a market decline and you are eyeing on a very good share which is trading at its all-time lowest price. But you don't have money to invest in that. So I am your broker. You will approach me and ask, can I get 2 lakhs as a margin to invest in this company? You can hold my portfolio as security. Okay. So if I lend him that 2 lakhs, I would become a margin provider. And the trade he does is a margin trading. Okay. Then you have underwriters. Very, very common entity who underwriters are. They are to give you an assurance. Look here. If your IPO doesn't go as you anticipated, underwriter is available to purchase the unsubscribed shares. Thirdly, you have credit rating agencies. The credit rating agencies look to rate a company or their security. Remember, credit rating agencies don't give credit rating for individuals. They only cater to institutions and the instruments that they issue. Okay, they will analyze the past, present, and the future information and provide the credit rating. Then you have investment managers whose purpose of work itself is to manage a portfolio and earn a good return to his investors. Clearinghouse, again, one of the support services that we have, one of the infrastructure facilities that we have. Clearing houses are available to support the post-trade settlement. They are there to validate whether a transaction has happened, whether the transaction has done according to the correct way, whether the interest of the buyers and sellers are met, and whether the obligation is finally settled. Okay, so that's what is called a clearing house. These five are the market intermediaries registered with the SEC. Okay. Now we are going to look at funds maintained by the Securities and Exchange Commission. I told you at the beginning of the class itself, there are three funds managed by the SEC. What are the three funds? The cess fund, compensation fund, and the settlement guarantee fund. Okay. Cess fund, compensation fund, settlement guarantee fund. Now, how is this cess fund made up of? Now, what do you mean by funds? Funds are certain pools of cash available for a purpose. Okay, so first we will look at cess fund. How is this cess fund created in the first place? The cess fund is created by the cess tax collected whenever there is a purchase and a sale of security. When you trade, when you buy and sell, there is a price that you pay. Okay. With the price, you have certain taxes that you need to pay. One of those taxes is called cess. This tax is collected and credited to this particular fund. Okay. If you go to our SEC, they will give you the transaction cost. Whenever you do a transaction, these are the costs that you have to incur. Okay. Aggregate of all this would be equal to 1.12%. Okay. Here you can see SEC says this cess amount is collected and credited to the SEC cess fund. Okay. Now these percentages you don't have to remember, but understand that this is one of the transaction costs. So whenever you do a transaction cost, 1.12% is deducted. Okay. Part of it is brokerage fee, part of it is the stock exchanges fee, part of it is CDS fees, part of it is the share transaction levy paid to IRD, and then you have the SEC cess tax as well. Okay. Now that is the main inflow to the fund. Okay. Now this the cess rate depends on what kind of a security that you're engaging in. Now if you read it up here, you will see that these are for the, according to the amount, it will differ. And then according to the type of the security as well, it will differ. If it's a corporate debt, this is how it will be. If it's a close-ended fund, if it's a government debt, this is how it will be. Okay, so depending on the type of the security, the cess percentage will vary as well. Now the amount you collected into the cess fund, how can it be utilized? Okay, how can you utilize, or for what purposes can you utilize this? Now the amount that you collected in the SEC as per the act is mentioned that you can use this money for the development of the securities market. To develop the securities market, to go organize investor forums, to organize certain campaigns, you could use this fund. Okay. Other purpose is if you need to improve the money balance in the compensation fund. Now remember there are three funds. If you feel the compensation fund amount is very low, then to improve that you can transfer a certain component from the cess fund to the compensation fund. Okay. Finally, whenever there is a certain action that need to be done to ensure that the commission meets its objective, then for those purposes also cess fund can be utilized. Okay. Then we have compensation fund and the settlement guarantee fund. Again, I'm highlighting it to you. Compensation fund is a fund that we saw in the objective of the SEC Act. So it's one of the important funds. Okay. So in what ways is the money collected for this fund? Are we going to tax the investors? No. Only for the cess we will tax and collect the funds to the cess fund. Compensation fund, we don't directly or additionally tax the investor. Okay. A compensation fund will get its money from the parliament mainly. The parliament can allocate certain funds for the purpose of a compensation fund. Okay. And if that fund is not enough, they could approach the cess fund and get some kind of money transferred from the cess fund as well. Okay. And if there is any fines or penalties collected, those can also be credited to the compensation fund. Okay. Now, what is the purpose of having a compensation fund? You are looking to compensate an investor who has suffered a financial loss due to a stockbroker, a stock dealer who is licensed by the SEC and is unable to discharge his contractual obligation. They have already contracted for certain transaction in this way. Now, what do you mean by contractual obligation is when you enter into a contract, both the parties have to perform in some way. One person will have to buy, one person will have to sell. Okay. So if a stock broker or a stock dealer doesn't meet their contractual obligation, in such a scenario, to compensate the investor, the compensation fund money is utilized. Okay. And then finally, you have the settlement guarantee fund. What is this settlement guarantee fund? It is one of the recently introduced fund types. You can see it's introduced in 1998. And what is this? What is the purpose of having this fund? The purpose is to guarantee the settlement of the trade whenever there's a trade done through the CDS. Now you will be wondering, why should you guarantee a settlement of trade? Let me explain that to you. Okay. This is I kept this as an example so you could see how capital market reacts in a circuit breaker. Okay. Now, when you do now in the Colombo Stock Exchange, let's say on the Monday, you do a transaction. A sells X company shares of 500 at 1 rupee each. Okay, sell. And then B buys it. Okay, what does it mean? A should get 500 rupees and B should get the shares. Okay, this is how it should work. But on the day they do the trade, the ownership changes, which means the share is now owned by B. Okay, but B doesn't pay A immediately. There is a 3-day gap. Within this 3 days, B can settle A. Okay, you call that T plus 3 days. T meaning trade day plus the third day, which means if its trade was done on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is when the exchange would happen. On this day, this transaction has to get fully settled. The money has to get transferred to T. Now, because there is a 3-day gap, what if there is a situation that the settlement is not done? How can you guarantee the settlement? Therefore, they have brought in a settlement guarantee fund. So, in case the counterparty defaults, the settlement guarantee fund will pay it for you. Okay, that's why you have the settlement guarantee fund. Now, this settlement guarantee fund and the compensation fund has not had any claims or there is no any payment out so far, which shows you how well our regulations are. There is no any person claiming for money under these two funds so far, which means that the investors have not had a financial loss and the settlements are going on smoothly. Okay. Now we are going to look at the main offences listed in the Securities and Exchange Commission Act. Okay, what are the main offences listed in the SEC Act? The very first one is insider dealing. Now, insider dealing, we will discuss that in detail. Let's keep that aside for now. Next is market or the price manipulation. Now, what do you mean by market or price manipulation? There are certain instances where certain investors, certain brokers, certain researchers could manipulate the market or the price. And that is an offense. What do you mean by manipulate the market? They could disclose false information. Okay, they could create market manipulating information to decline the price so they can purchase it. Okay, or price manipulation is now when they on a very fine trading day, there are a lot of codes in the market buying and selling, and someone is coming to buy this particular share. They put their code. Let's say this company has 100 million shares. This person is putting a code for 50 million shares, which is 50% of it, at a very low price. Let's say this share is getting traded at 10 rupees. This person is putting the quote at 2 rupees. Okay, and such a big amount. Then other investors might get shocked and they might see that, oh my God, maybe it's actually worth only at 2 rupees. Currently, it's overpriced. And that could cause a manipulatory environment. Okay, now currently you have certain regulations to overcome that. In the stock exchange, you cannot put a quote at a price outside a certain band. There is a certain price range within which you can give your quote. Let's say there's a 10 rupee trading stock. You can't give a quotation at 2 rupees, which is very, very low. There is a range. You could give your quote minimum at 8 rupees or maximum at 12 rupees. You can't increase further than that unless the broker requests. Okay. So that is what market or price manipulation is. Then you have something called front running. Front running is just like insider trading, but it's a little bit different. Okay, let's keep that also aside. I'll explain it to you. Then you have failure to immediately disclose material information. What do you mean by failure to immediately disclose material information? Let's say there is a fraud that has happened in the company, and that company is not disclosing it immediately, so that because the market might react aggressively and they would hide it and maybe put it out at a later date, try to rectify it. Okay, so without immediately disclosing the market information, they are doing an offense. They should ideally disclose. They have the obligation to disclose to the owners of the company, who are the shareholders. Okay, now it's not only, let's say they lose a particular order, one of their main clients is exiting. Things like that is one of the key areas. Then you have non-provision of information and provision of false or misleading information to SEC. Now, not providing any information or providing false information are both offenses when it comes to SEC. They should inform the correct information, the true information, and the material information in a timely manner. Okay, that's what is required. Then, if the entity submits false or fake financial statements to the Colombo Stock Exchange, that's an offense as well. Okay. Finally, if they violate any provisions of the Company Takeover and Mergers Code, that is also an offense under SEC. Okay. Now, what is insider trading? Now, we have heard a lot of news about this. This word is now very popular with everyone. Even the students are aware of it, about it. But let me explain it a little bit for you. Okay. Insider trading is where someone inside the organization who has access to non-public and material information uses that information to trade before the market is aware about it. Simple as that. What is it? A person inside the entity or related to someone inside the entity acts on information which is important, which is material, but until now it's not public. Okay, and uses that information to do a particular trading. That trading or dealing is called insider trading or insider dealing. Okay, now what do you mean by material information? Information that has a high likelihood of causing a huge difference in investor opinion. Let's say a company loses one of their biggest customer who has contributed 50% of their top line. Okay, now this is material. Why? 50% of the company's sale is now going to wipe out from the future. Okay, material information. Decision altering information is called material information. Will you want to invest in a company who's losing business? Let's say they lost a small customer who accounted only 2% of sales. You might not bother. But if they lose a customer who accounted 60% of sale or 50% of sale, it is material. How is the company going to search another customer to compensate for that? Okay. So material information means some piece of information which has the impact or the likelihood for the investor to alter his decision whether to buy, sell, or hold a certain share is called material information. What do you mean by non-public information? Non-public information means information which is not made public at the moment. There is some kind of information, but only the employees of the company know it. Only the directors of the company know it so far. It's not disclosed to the public yet. How do you disclose to the public? Through a press release. Okay, so they have not informed the company with a press release, with a forum or so forth. Hence, it is considered as a non-public information. Okay, that means it's new information that the market is still not aware about. How is this insider trading happening? Always there is someone inside to the information who's starting this, who's kick-starting this. Okay. Now, someone inside the organization who is aware about this sensitive information will give this information to another outsider or would act on their own account. Usually what happens is they give this information to an outsider. Okay. And that outsider will use this information and trade. Let's say it's a positive information, then the outsider will try to buy the company share. Let's say it's a negative information, they would sell the company share before the information is out. Okay. The outsider takes the first trading position before the announcement happens. That's the important case here. Now, if you draw a timeline, okay, if you draw a timeline, let's say this is the day of news release. Okay, the day before, any days before the press release, they will act in certain way. Let's say it's a good information, then they will buy. Let's say it's bad information or a bad news, then they will sell. Why? Now, before the good news is out, if they buy, they can buy at a lower price. Before bad news is out, they can sell at a higher price. After the information is made public, if it's a good news, the outsider will take the opposite stance, which means they will sell. Why? Now it's good information, therefore price is now higher, they can get a good gain. Okay. Let's say it's bad news that has been released. Now what do? In the bad news scenario, stock prices are crashing. Then the outsider can take the opposite scenario and buy again at a cheap price. Now this is on their discretion. They could buy or they could completely exit the stock as well. So before the information is out, they act on that information. After the information is made public, they take the opposite to the previous trade. They take the opposite position to the previous trade. Okay. In almost all countries, insider trading is illegal, but that doesn't mean that directors are not allowed to trade. Okay. Directors and employees are allowed to trade, but whenever they trade, they need to make the announcement to the stock exchange. informing, look here, I bought this much of company's share at this price. Okay, that should be made available to the stock exchange. In our market, it should be done within 5 days. Now, if you go to SEC website, you can see here dealings by directors. So whenever there are certain directors buying and selling, so this is the director's name. So see, whenever they buy the share, the date they did the transaction, the quantity and the price, they have to disclose. Same thing here. Okay. Not that they are not allowed to trade, but whenever they trade, they need to disclose to the market within 5 days. Okay. Now we are going to see what is front running. Now, front running is a fairly new concept. You might not have heard about it, but it's very easy to learn. The name is very clear for you. Front running. What do you mean by front running? Someone is running before you, overtaking you. They take the position. They run before you is what is called front run. Front running in finance is known as a person acting on an information before the information is released. Okay, now you'll be wondering, that's the same thing that happens in insider dealing now. So why do you call it front running? Let me explain. Now, front running can happen in 3 ways. Okay, 3 ways. One way is broker front running. Broker front running means, let's assume I am a stock broker. Okay, so first the orders come to me essentially. Okay, my customer will approach me and tell, look here, Amanda, I want to buy. Now there is a company. The company share capital in terms of number of shares is 100 million shares. I want to buy 60% and take the controlling stake of this company. Okay, so I want to buy 60 million shares. Why don't you get me some buyers so I can buy, get me some sellers so I can buy it from them. Okay, now first information is hitting me, the broker. Okay, now I know, okay, this customer is an international fund or a foreign company. If they buy this company's share, that company's share is going to skyrocket. Okay, that's the information only I know now. What do? I am now supposed to execute the buying order of my customer, okay, who wants to buy 60 million shares of a company. But I know this is going to shock the market. Market is going to react very well, and the price of that company's share that they are going to buy is going to shoot up. What am I doing? Before I execute my customer's order, I will execute order for myself. I will first buy some shares of that company. Let's say I will buy some 10,000 shares. So I ran before the client's interest. Before the customer purchased, I went and purchased at a better price. Okay. So do you get what I'm saying? That's what you call front running. Before your client's interest, you put your interest first. Okay. So let's say I bought some company's shares and then I will execute my client's order. Now when I execute, the market is aware about it, they react positively and the price shoots up. Okay. And now I can sell my shares at a much higher price and get a gain. That is broker front running. That is one type. Second is analyst front running. What do you mean by analyst front running? In our capital market, you have someone called research analyst. What is their job? Their job is to analyze the listed companies and give recommendations to the investors. They give investor recommendations such as, okay, buy this company share, don't buy this company share. If you have this share, hold it for now, not a selling point so far. Okay, buy, sell or hold recommendations are given by the analyst to the investors. Okay, now let's say I am an analyst. I was an analyst before I became a banker. So let's say when I was an analyst, there is let's say for a very material company, let's say something like a tobacco company, or analyzing or putting out a research report. Okay, now not only one person does the research. Okay, usually it's a team who does the research, because it's so in depth. So when the team does the research, as an analyst, now I'm aware, no, the recommendation of the report is going to be a sell recommendation, which means we are going to ask the investors, look here, not a good time to hold this company share, sell it immediately. That's going to be the recommendation. But so far we have not published it. Okay. Now, as a person in this team, what am I going to do? If I have that company shares, or if I know someone who has that company shares, I'm going to immediately ask them to sell it. To sell it immediately, there's a bad report going to come out. Okay, and once the bad report comes out, maybe the share price will crash and the other investors will lose out money. Let's say it's a good report, we are saying excellent company, purchase immediately. Okay, before the report is out, I might buy it for myself. Okay, because I know a good recommendation is going to come out. And when the recommendation is out, I know the prices will shoot up as expected, and the analyst can sell off the shares that they have. That is called analyst front running. Okay. The third type of front running is called index front running. Now, index front running, it is not illegal. That's important. Not all types of front running is illegal. Broker front running is illegal. Analyst front running is illegal. But index front running is not illegal. Now you will be wondering, why am I saying that? Now let's see. Remember last week I told you every 6 months there is news on what are the new companies introduced, right? Sorry, new companies included in S&P SL20. Sorry. I told you every 6 months they will rebalance the S&P SL20. They will have certain companies included in the index. They will exclude certain companies from the index. Okay. Now this information is released when? On December 18th, 2020. If you take the calendar, go back, December 18th, 2020 is Friday. Okay, on Friday, this decision is taken. Okay, and when is this effected? It is effected from 21st December. Which means from the Monday onwards, it is impacted. So usually there is a 1 day gap. Now during this 1 day gap, certain investors, once the announcement is done, certain investors will start to collect these stocks before the stock is included in the index. Why? They are going to include it to the index from 21st December 2020. Okay. So before it is included, certain investors might buy. That is called index front running. Before it is included into the index, investors run before that and collect it, hypothetically. Okay. So that is called index front running. But it is not one of the illegal forms of front running. Why is that? Because a press release is already made. It is it's between the press release date and the implementation date that the front running happens. Okay, so that is not considered as illegal. So remember that. I'll try to put a few slides on what front running and the types is as well, the types are as well, just for you to have certain notes on it. Okay. And then now we are going to move to the ethical framework and the best practices relating to the professional conduct published by the SEC. Now with the notes, I would have given you the SEC Act together with all the amendments. This is the consolidated act. With all the amendments being included, you have the entire act here. Now I know this has 54 pages, but my recommendation for you is at least have a read through it. You have a longer time. You have the entire of April now with a lot of holidays. Read it. Now if you take one day to read it, it's sufficient. Okay. You read the entire segment, entire act. Just have a glance through it and highlight and make a note on the side. Because even though there are certain commonly tested area, in your exam, there is a probability to go to an additional new area as well. Okay. So that's why I'm telling you, I have given you the entire act, consolidated version, read through it and highlight the essential requirements. Okay. In addition to that, I have included the ethical framework and best practices in professional conduct as well for you. Again, this is 24 pages. There are examples here given for you as well. So it's like a story for you that you can have a good read in, have a good check on these scenarios and have a thorough understanding as well. Okay. Now we are closer to the time to end, so we can have a look at it. We'll have a look at the last two slides in our next class. So we have this independence and objective and misrepresentation to look at. We'll cover it in our next class. But what I'm recommending to you is go through this lecture material, and in addition to that, have a read with the SEC Act and the ethical conduct framework as well, because there's a lot of opportunity for the examiner to go in different ways and test when it comes to this subject, okay, or this lesson. Okay, so next week when we join in, let's start from this particular title. Okay, and let's move to a new lesson as well. Thank you so much for listening in. Let's meet again. I think we could meet again next Friday, hopefully. We'll try to put in a new class for next Friday when there is a leave or there's a bank holiday. So again, we could meet on that day and then again on Saturday as well. Okay. Thank you so much for listening in. We'll catch you in at our next class. Okay.